Hello and welcome to The Radical. I'm Christina.
And I'm Nicole. On our podcast, we delve into the roots of metaphysical wisdom.
That's right, Nicole. Our podcast is all about exploring those fundamental truths and practices that nourish your mind, body, and spirit.
Yes, Christina, we want to make metaphysical concepts easy to understand and accessible, especially for those who don't have a ton of time to do all the research.
Right? We'll do the research as well as share our experiences and perspectives, hoping to empower you, our listener, to find balance and magic in your day-to-day.
Inspired by the essence of the word radical, proceeding from the root, let's explore the roots of well-being and self-healing together.
This is The Radical with Christina and Nicole, two metaphysical girls in the material world.
Hello and welcome to The Radical. I'm Nicole.
And I'm Christina.
Today we are talking about eclipses. Christina has a list for us.
What a fun subject. I knew very, very little about eclipses.
I think I knew very little. I really didn't know what I was going to talk about or research.
Me too. I had a little panic where I was just going to do a open source search. I was like, I'm going to sound like a school teacher, but I did not. I went down a few rabbit holes.
I'm excited to hear your list. I learned a brand new concept, eclipse families.
Oh, I didn't come across that at all.
Yeah, so we'll dive into that in segment 2. And then in our final segment, I have 3 cards from the Antique Anatomy Tarot deck.
Oh, I like this one. These are the best pictures. I love the pictures of those.
So we will start off with Christina teaching us.
Segment 1 begins with the definition of an eclipse. An eclipse is when one celestial object passes into the shadow of another. From Earth, we see 2 types of eclipses: lunar and solar. Eclipses are predictable, and astronomers can calculate them out many years in advance. They're mathematical realities. Do you like things to be predictable? I do. I'm a planner.
I think there's a certain comfort in the predictability of astronomy.
I like how they are actual events based on actual objects and not man-made up celebrations of things that can be perceived differently from different historical points of view. Going back from our Hallmark holidays is that marking these events to me feels more relatable, I guess I would say. But anyway, see, and I can't even get through my list, Nicole. I'm already off on a tangent about predictability. Okay, lunar eclipses occurs when Earth is between the sun and the moon. Okay. A lunar eclipse occurs when Earth is between the sun and the moon. The moon is in the Earth's shadow, so the moon appears dark. This can only occur when the moon is full. I will be talking more about all those points. That's the first thing. Solar eclipse, when the moon is between the sun and the Earth. How can the moon block the sun when the sun is so big and the moon is so small? The magic number for this phenomena, is that how you say that word, phenomena?
I think phenomena might be plural and phenomenon is singular.
Phenomenon.
Maybe.
Phenomena and phenomenon. Okay, listeners, if I use those interchangeably, you'll have to forgive me. So 400. The sun is 400 times bigger than the moon, but the sun is 400 times further away. Mathematically, that is why the moon can block the sun. Solar eclipses can only happen during new moons. Did not even realize that. Because the orbit is elliptic, which means it's not a circle, it's more like a egg shape or a oval. Yeah. The moon is at its closest to Earth. That's the perigee. That would be a total solar eclipse because the moon, from our vantage point, looks a little bit bigger. When the moon is at its furthest, or apogee, that's called an annular eclipse, where a ring of the sun is visible because the moon appears smaller to us. So those are the two types of solar eclipses based on where the moon is. There are between 2 and 5 eclipses each year, with the total eclipse taking place every 18 months or so. Total solar eclipses are seen every 400 years from the same spot on the surface of the Earth. The path of totality, where the moon completely covers the sun, often occurs over the ocean rather than populated areas. That's why you may only see or be in a place where you can see a total solar eclipse once or sometimes never. But it's happening all the time over the ocean. So, yes, there is significantly more sea than land on Earth. Do you want to know how much more? 71% of the Earth's surface is covered by oceans. I mean, I knew it was high, but I don't think I thought it was 71%.
I think I remember learning it was about 3/4.
Then you look at a globe. Listeners, if you have a globe at your house, turn it towards the Pacific side and look at how much land mass is visible from the Pacific side of the Earth. I saw a picture of this on the internet, and there's islands there. They're just so small, but the whole Pacific Ocean is like one whole section of the globe. So that's where all those beautiful solar eclipses are happening that we can't see. 71%. Okay, 2025. There will be 4 eclipses in 2025, 2 lunar and 2 solar. A lunar eclipse March 14th, 2025, and a lunar eclipse September 7th, 2025. The March 14th lunar eclipse is known as the blood moon, and that one will be visible from North America, Europe, and Africa. The September 7th lunar eclipse is visible from Europe, Africa, Asia, and Australia. We've got the 2 solar eclipses on March 29th is a partial solar eclipse that'll be visible from Europe and Northwestern Africa and Northwest Russia. And then the second solar is September 21st. That's a partial solar eclipse that'll be visible from New Zealand and Antarctica. There's an eclipse season. There's usually 2 eclipse seasons each year. It's not just a coincidence that these are happening in March and September and March and September. The eclipse seasons, each lasting about 35 to 38 days. Each season repeats about 6 months later because, and this is why not every new moon is a solar eclipse and every full moon a lunar eclipse. Because the sun and the earth rotate around, like the earth rotates around the sun, and that can be made into a 2D model called the ecliptic. The moon doesn't rotate on that plane. It's 5 degrees off. The moon is above and below the sun outside of that point for most of the year. Only 2 times a year. And you know what those are called? They're called the, I have it written down, the lunar nodes. Those points where they come together. So it's about 5 degrees off, lunar nodes twice a year. And
the north node and the south node.
Yes. See, it's all, I'm telling you, I knew that, but I didn't really think about what it meant until I did this. And there are so many beautiful pictures and lectures and graphics, and people have put so much time and energy to provide this information for free on the internet. If I found, I've watched about 4 this morning, and they were all excellent. There's more information out there, listeners. Beautiful videos on this stuff. And eclipse season isn't always the same time of year every year. It shifts about 20 days a year because the moon has a wobble, just like the earth has a wobble. We have the precession of the equinoxes because the earth is spinning like a top that's moving back and forth. Well, the moon is doing the same thing. That's why the eclipses aren't at the exact same time every year. And I am simplifying this. And like I said, there's people who made beautiful videos and information about this and articles on the internet. I want to talk about solar eclipse phenomena. And there's 2, so that was correct. That was the plural, phenomena. The diamond ring effect is a striking sight that occurs when a total solar eclipse. It happens when right at the moment the moon is passing in front of the sun. But it's really interesting to remind ourselves that the moon isn't a flat, smooth object. It has huge mountains and valleys and topography. Just like you'd be looking at the sunset past a mountain range and the light would be coming in through. That's what's happening. That's why there's points of light around the moon. It's in the valleys and being broken up by valleys and mountains on the moon. Isn't that wonderful to think about?
Yeah.
It creates a diamond ring effect where there's a bunch of light on one side, but also there's something else called Bailey's beads, named after a British astronomer called Francis Bailey, who discovered the eclipse phenomenon. This effect looks like beads of light poking out from around the moon's shadow. And that's because of the moon's rugged terrain. I loved reading about that. And I was so excited to tell Nicole this. And then I looked at our notes, and Nicole always has beautiful pictures to illustrate her points. And one of her pictures is of the Bailey beads and the diamond ring effect.
Yeah, I see it now.
Yes! But I don't know if you're talking about Bailey's beads. I think
I had
you're
not
talking
heard
about
of
a lot
them.
other stuff. But how cool is that? To be able to, from our vantage point, be aware of and see the effects of the moon's valleys and mountains from our point of view. And it's very quick. So you could probably find some really good pictures on it, but the effect is only a couple seconds if you are watching a solar eclipse with protective equipment. Then you can see it a lot easier. But there's beautiful photos of it. All right, do you want to hear something sad?
Aw.
We know the Earth and the moon are moving away from each other. The moon is leaving us. So do you know that there will be no more eclipses? The moon will eventually be so far away that it won't block the sun.
That might be the least of our concerns when that happens.
Never mind not viewing your Bailey's beads. We got bigger issues if we don't get a solar eclipse. But yeah, the Earth and the moon are moving away from each other. The moon will look smaller and smaller through the ages, eventually grow so small that it will no longer completely occult our star. And someone wrote that so beautifully. And total eclipses will vanish. I remember doing was it the sun or the moon podcast? And I was like, this makes me really sad to think about the moon moving away from us.
I think it was the moon podcast.
But we need to do a podcast on the moon phases. I'm not discussing them in this podcast, but there is some stuff we can talk about with how, when, why, and the science behind that. Okay, we're going to go from science to superstitions. Don't use any sharp or pointy objects during eclipses. Maybe because you will be cutting something and then suddenly it gets dark and you might cut your finger or but I found a few recurring themes with superstitions relating to eclipses. So, no sharp objects, and don't eat, drink, or cook during an eclipse. Don't go outside. I think you talked about that in one of our podcasts, right?
I remember that one, and I think it was the Superstitions podcast. And if I remember correctly, that one has some scientific merit to it, and it had to do with microbes growing or reproducing or spreading quicker during an eclipse.
I think it might. Well, I have another point. We're going to briefly discuss the like animal behavior during this time too. That things can get unpredictable. But it's perfectly safe to do any of these things. These are superstitions. These are not realities. I did read this one that I thought was really interesting is to shower or bathe yourself after the eclipse. If you're doing any kind of meditation or work or you're out in the eclipse, because then that cleanses the residual cosmic energy off of you and you kind of reset yourself. And I didn't grow up with any stories about eclipses. I have no memory of any ecliptical events in my in my in my childhood. Do you have any eclipse stories?
I have a really vague memory of making something in elementary school that I guess captured it basically projected the eclipse. I want to say it was like through a paper towel roll or
Aww.
something. And because they didn't want to take us outside and have us looking up and trying to, keep eclipse glasses on a bunch of young elementary school
Mm-hmm.
kids. So we made these boxes or rolls or something that projected the shadow onto the ground, and we watched the solar eclipse that way.
That is so cool. I remember we had the great the great North American or American eclipse in August of 2017.
Mm-hmm.
And I have memories of this where the children were doing tons of projects. They were using the special papers to make paper plate things that they put over their whole face to protect their eyes, because looking at a solar eclipse is incredibly dangerous for your eyes. And people do it to the very real detriment of their retinas. You must have something to look through and not a phone and not a camera lens to look at an eclipse. I think that the urge is very great in mankind to kind of get a peek at it through like your sunglasses or something. Do you know what I mean? But it is very dangerous. So if you are lucky enough to be in a space with a solar eclipse, get the proper eyewear. And I'm like, I just mentioned this at the beginning of the podcast. I'm a nature girl now. I've been like rolling with the wheel of the year. I've become more aware of the constellations through the zodiac, year. And I look at all of these natural and cosmic events, these mathematical realities, and these actual physical events and interactions between planets as a chance to heal and energize. And I love staying connected to the rhythms of life. So, not just like the earthly rhythms, but like the cosmic rhythms, the cosmic cycles. So, I'm connecting deeply to this, especially now that I have a bigger understanding of the timeline, which I didn't at all have any understanding of the timeline of eclipses until I researched this podcast. So, why it might have been dangerous to go outside? Because animals react to solar eclipses by beginning their nighttime routines as the totality approaches where they are, and they get confused and might act in unpredictable ways. They have wonderful articles about observing animals in zoos that I could read all day. I could watch videos on this all day. I love observing animals. I mean, better in like the natural world, but you don't always have that option during a solar eclipse, and the zoos will ask for volunteers to watch the animals and write down everything they see, and it is absolutely fascinating. But generally, animals aren't going to damage their own eyes looking at the solar eclipse. They're not going to look at the sun. But I did read an article that said don't encourage your animals to look at it, because your dog and cats, they normally don't stare at the sun. They heed their natural reflexes not to look, unlike us humans who are just like, what? So avoid encouraging your pets to look at the eclipse. They will not understand it. Somebody wrote that. And then I mentioned that about zoos. 75% of species showed a change of some sort during eclipses. And there's tons of information out that on there if that gets you interested in that. The March 14th lunar eclipse. I want to chat about this for anybody in the Americas. It'll be after midnight, 6 hours long. The peak of it is going to be 0230 a.m. to 3:30 or 0330 a.m. The red or the coppery color of these lunar eclipses is because of the way the Earth's atmosphere reacts with the sun's light. That our atmosphere disperses the blue, greens, and yellows, and the reds and the oranges concentrate or are allowed to go through. Isn't that fascinating? And that's where blood moon comes from. It'll be a dark red coppery color because of the way the light filters and reflects or bends. And the reason why we have totality and we have different, like depending on where you're standing, and this is a phrase I haven't heard before, is the umbra, which is the shadow of the Earth or the shadow of the moon. It looks like a bullseye, that there is one dot that is completely dark, and then there's concentric rings outside of that where, depending on where you're standing, your viewpoint is you're not directly under the Earth or the moon during an eclipse. That's why you might not get, that's what the path of totality means. The Earth's umbra. You'll either be directly underneath it or off to the side, which will affect the way that you're viewing the eclipse. So the word umbra, I read about this way too long. The Earth's umbra, so this is for a lunar eclipse. And you remember, the lunar eclipse is when the Earth is passing in between the sun and the moon. Okay, so we're talking about the Earth's shadow on the moon. The Earth's umbra refers to the darkest central part of the shadow cast by the Earth. Umbra, Latin for shadow. It's like umbrella, which is what that word originally meant, or the root of that word. It's the region of total shadow because the object is so large. Like if a human shadow, you're not going to see the concentric, like the light and the darkness of it, but these celestial objects are so big that we're seeing the full effect of the way the light is affecting that object between us and the sun. It is amazing. And they have beautiful maps about this. They've got videos on this. I thought it was so cool. And I had never heard of those, of umbra or penumbra before, which is the first ring outside of that central ring. I'm not going to go down the rabbit hole. I have lots of notes on this, but I'm skipping it. It'll come up later, I'm sure. The one thing I want to say about this for a lunar eclipse, so specifically, lunar eclipses happen frequently, as we talked about, but we're not always right in the space of them. But the one that's happening or has happened for our listeners on the 14th of March, you're experiencing the Earth's umbra. You as humans on this planet, we only experience being in the Earth's shadow under two circumstances: at night The Earth's shadow, or umbra, is what causes night. As the Earth rotates, it moves into the umbra, which is the darkest part of the Earth's shadow. And then the second time is during a lunar eclipse. The lunar eclipse happens when the moon passes through the Earth's shadow. That happens when the Earth and the moon and the sun are precisely aligned. This is during I'm skipping that. I'm not talking about that. So listen, a lunar eclipse, it's nighttime and you're in the shadow of the Earth reflected back at you on the moon. It's a double shadow, you guys. There's only 2 times to be in the Earth's shadow. And at that particular moment, you're in the shadow of the Earth. And then when that moon comes through, the light isn't reflected back at you from the sun. The Earth's shadow is reflected back at you. That's like double Earth shadow. The moon is reflecting back. You are in total shadow. So what does that make you think of? Shadow work? Releasing? Deep dark secrets? I was so inspired by this thought that, well, we'll discuss it a little bit once we get towards the end. But I was so inspired by this. And thinking about it in this way, it made it seem very tangible to me and more real to me what is actually going on during these lunar eclipses.
Double dark shadow.
Isn't that cool? Okay. Unlike solar eclipses, lunar eclipses, perfectly safe to watch with the naked eye. You don't need protective glasses or special equipment. And binoculars and telescopes can be super helpful with lunar eclipses. And now that we talked about it, maybe you guys will be inspired to go out and find out when the next one's happening in your area. Or write us, email us, and tell us if you had any experiences with the one that just happened on the 14th of March. But solar eclipses have eye protection.
Yeah.
Don't look at a solar eclipse without eye protection. Okay, I'm going to stop there.
I think the idea of the double shadow
will
come back.
That's why I saved it for last. That and the concept of the umbra. That point. I'm being inspired by it. Anyway, more on that later. But that's my list, Nicole.
So I'm just going to start segment 2. Christina just stopped. I'm just going to start. I'm going to begin.
No fanfare with this podcast. It just goes. It just goes on.
We're just going. So I'm going to first talk about the Dresden Codex. I'd never heard of this before researching this podcast. It is a Maya book. It is believed to be the oldest surviving book written in the Americas, dating back to the 11th or the 12th century, although it may be a little bit older than this by about 100 years. I heard it referred to as a ritual manual. The Dresden Codex is 78 pages long, and it contains various information, some relating to astronomical and astrological tables. There's some religious references, seasons of the earth, medical information on illness, and it's all written in Mayan hieroglyphs. It is thought that the Dresden Codex originated in the area of Chichen Itza because the certain symbols in the codex are only found on monuments in that location, and the astronomical tables align and support that being the place of origin. So this book, the Codex, also survived the Spanish Inquisition. It was rediscovered in the city of Dresden, Germany, which is why it's called the Dresden Codex. And it unfortunately was water damaged. It was being stored in a basement in Germany during World War II, but it's being studied, and what sort of is left of it, not water damaged. There's a lot of information out there on its contents. It includes specifically some Venus tables and some lunar tables. There's a lot of information in the codex about the conjunctions of the planets and the moons. And like I said, sort of an emphasis on Venus and the moon. The lunar tables from this codex are said to be accurate to the minute. And 8 pages of the 78 pages are dedicated to eclipses and maintaining the eclipse tables.
Yeah.
The Maya tracked solar eclipses and attempted to predict them. They thought there was a correspondence between rainfall and solar eclipses, so they wanted to try to predict when those would happen for kind of agricultural and food growing purposes. So I'm reading about this, watching some videos, and I hear the term eclipse families. And I had to go and learn more. I'd never ever heard of eclipse families, but they are referenced in this very, very old Maya book. Eclipse families are also known as Saros cycles. And a Saros series typically lasts 1200 to 1500 years and includes about 70 to 80 individual eclipses. Each eclipse family begins as a small partial eclipse near either the North or the South Pole, and over the centuries, the eclipses within the family move closer and closer to the equator. And a cycle, a Saros cycle, it's a group of solar and lunar eclipses, and they're linked by patterns in the sun, Earth, and moon and their orbits. And I love this because I love statements that say approximately and then give you something really specific. But each eclipse in a family is separated by approximately 18 years, 11 days, and 8 hours. And this cycle occurs because the 3 key factors for an eclipse, the moon's phase, its distance from the Earth, and its position relative to the sun, repeats in a predictable rhythm, like Christina mentioned in the first segment. And then as the eclipse family kind of progresses one to the next, the patterns are the same, but the eclipse itself occurs about 8 hours later, shifting visibility to a different part of the world. So that just kind of blew my mind that there's a link from eclipse to eclipse over several hundred years. Christina mentioned the Great American Eclipse in August of 2017.
Yeah,
This
you have
is
the date.
Yes.
It's the 21st.
Yes, August 21st, 2017. This eclipse was part of, or is part of, Saros cycle 145.
Oh.
And that eclipse family is going to continue producing total solar eclipses until the year 2648.
Wow.
And the picture Christina referenced earlier, I put it in our notes, and you can put it on Instagram too, but it's a picture I took from Nashville, Tennessee on August 21st, 2017. And you can see the Bailey's beads and kind of the ring of fire as well. It was
a
really
beautiful picture. That is like beautiful.
Well, we were all kind of a little bummed. My friend and I planned this trip like a year and a half in advance of this eclipse. And it was kind of cloudy that day. So you do see in this picture the cloud coverage. So I'm glad the picture came out.
Yeah.
Because it's kind of through the clouds.
I like the clouds. It gives it some atmosphere.
Yes. And I put 2 other pictures in our notes, and we can post these on Instagram as well. These 2 other pictures are from April 8th, 2024. This was an eclipse from Saros cycle 139. And that Saros cycle began way back on May 17th, 1501. It will include 71 eclipses, and the one on April 8th, 2024 was number 30 in that series. I noted here that eclipses from Saros cycle 139 are notable because they are of a longer duration. That solar eclipse on April 8th had a maximum duration of 4 minutes and 28 seconds. And the next eclipse in Saros cycle 139 will be April 20th, 2042. And currently there are 40 active Saros cycles, 19 solar ones and 21 lunar ones. So
Wow.
this got me thinking about, we've talked about eclipses before, specifically when we've talked about the lunar nodes, the north node and the south node. And I've always thought of them and heard eclipses and their energy described as being extra potent. It was a really powerful time for either setting new intentions or letting things go. And this to me really broadened my feeling of the energetic impacts of eclipses. So, a couple of themes that came up for me in this research was this idea of humility but vulnerability. So, if the sun is our source of light and our vitality, and also represents our ego, then a solar eclipse reminds us as humans of our vulnerability within our delicate ecosystem on Earth. We are totally dependent upon the sun. So these eclipses, they're a good time for us to ask ourselves, are we living in balance and harmony? In what ways are we out of touch or out of sync with Earth's ecosystem? And are we showing respect, gratitude, and humility for our place within the ecosystem? Not just of Earth, but Christina, said too, like the entire cosmos. Are we showing gratitude for everything Earth, nature, and the cosmos gives to us? Are we reflecting our humility and our place in this grander scheme? I wrote down, it is a humbling reminder of lunar power. This is more so with the solar eclipse because lunar power in this context is the ability to cover the sun, block the light, and cause darkness. So if we take that metaphor and extend it out, not just the power of the moon, lunar power, but all things tied to the moon symbolically, yin essence, the power of our emotions, the unseen, and the shadow, the double shadow. How are we honoring that which is unseen of the feminine essence, of the yin essence? Are we honoring our emotions and our shadow? Do we let those things empower us? And again, are we in balance and harmony with those aspects within ourselves? And when I think about the eclipse families and the duration of these eclipse families over hundreds and hundreds of years, and as the eclipse families start at the North or South Pole and make their way to the equator, they're sort of on this journey, right? So it makes me think of another form of the hero's journey. Are eclipses these chapters in a grand celestial narrative? What are they trying to teach us about our hero's journey, our human evolution? Eclipse families demonstrate a mathematical connection of eclipse energy over time, like chapters in a story or portals to the energy of our evolution.
I have even more deep thoughts now.
I thought you would. When you were describing the double shadow, I had this image come to my mind of like a dark sky full of stars.
Mm-hmm.
But instead of it being a sky, it's like a big lake or a big ocean. And then somebody going fishing into this dark pool of water, which is the sky full of stars, and like retrieving information from it.
Wow.
And I kind of think I have a new and deeper appreciation of and for eclipses.
Mm-hmm.
And if we also remember that the eclipses happen usually within the sign of the nodes, right?
Mm-hmm.
And if we remember, the nodes are energetically sort of indicating as a collective what we are walking towards.
Mm-hmm.
And then the south node, on one hand, is what we're leaving behind. But on the other hand, the valuable lessons that we are going to bring with us. It really is this big, continuous hero's journey.
Yeah.
It is a celestial narrative. And the nodes and the zodiac signs, I think, help tell that story. And then the geometry,
Mm-hmm.
the alignments that happen bring that potency, that energetic potency, where it's like we kind of get a big download of information to integrate and help us evolve.
It's a dance. It's a celestial dance. Energy pushing and pulling and drawing, and understanding the science and the math behind it helps me appreciate it and understand it more. I can understand that some people might prefer just to leave it in a very nebulous way, that it just is what it is. Your imagery of the water and the lake and fishing is the I'm not going to say opposite, because what's opposite, right? So my imagery, after I was talking about and thinking and meditating on the double shadow, was that it was the earth. I feel like, and listeners, as we're recording this, it hasn't happened yet. It's not like I'm thinking about what I might want to do on the March 14th lunar eclipse, based on everything that we just learned, that I want to do some kind of earth appreciation, or I want to bury something in the earth as a way of marking and being in that shadow, that double shadow aspect of the earth. So for me, it's about the physical planet that we're on, and being so, or wanting to be so connected deeply to this, the physical earth that I'm sitting on. And it's so funny. You're thinking about water and I'm thinking about earth.
Mm-hmm.
Isn't that
Yeah.
funny? How the, because it's just energy. We can interpret it however we want. And the most important thing to remember, listeners, is you're never wrong as long as you're being true to yourself. There's no right way to mark a celestial event or a lunar event. Do the research just like we did, and then just follow your intuition.
Mm-hmm.
Just totally follow it. That it, on any lunar eclipse day, I'll be sitting in my backyard with the shovel and a bundle of I don't know what that I would be meditating on and then giving to the earth, and Nicole be sitting in her space with a big bowl of water, looking at the have you ever heard of this? You look at the eclipse in the reflection of the water.
Ooh, I
It's
like that.
was very meditative and very metaphysical, witchy.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? That, and then Nicole will be sitting there with her bowl of water, and I'll be digging in the earth. Like everybody can interact with this energy however they see fit.
Mm-hmm.
That is so amazing to me. That anyway, so I'm feeling like I might want to stay up or wake up to view this eclipse because it's through the early hours. I'm thinking about shadow work, what that means to me and how that relates to me, and a deep sense of a self inventory of what do you like, what do I really want to let go? And that's what I would symbolize through the bearing or burning of something to give to that earth shadow, to that moment.
Yeah.
And truly, because we all have these things that we're going through. But the fact is I the self inventory would be, am I really ready to let go of it? Because sometimes we want to let go but we're not ready. So if I do this on this eclipse, I'm letting it go. If I give it to the earth, I'm not going to go out there and dig it back up again. And that's a little scary sometimes because
Yeah.
sometimes our issues are our armor and our guard, you know? But it's an incredibly powerful, or can be an incredibly powerful, energetic time to connect with. Nicole, you said something yesterday about what we both believe, that when we're moving through healing, we energy is energy, and sometimes we have to add energy and sometimes we have to release energy. We have to do it
Mm-hmm.
mindfully, right? So there's no
Mm-hmm.
wrong answer whether you're receiving or letting go.
Yeah. And listening to your intuition is very much in line with what the moon teaches us. And I like what
Mm-hmm.
you said. If you're letting something go, you know, that imagery of putting it in the earth, you're not going to go into your backyard a week later and dig it back up. You are
Mm-hmm.
ready to let it go. And for me, I think I'm at a point in my healing journey where I need things added in. So maybe that's why for me, the fishing, going fishing and like trying to retrieve something from the depths.
Yeah. Or you're
Yes,
looking for something.
yes,
Yeah.
show me what I need.
Yeah.
Show me what I need now. And yours is more of a shedding and letting
Yeah.
go.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I love it. So listeners, like I said, if this is the March 15th or any thing that you had happen or you did during an eclipse, write us, email us, let us know what experiences you guys had, cuz I'm sure we'll talk about it again.
Yes. And when in doubt, you can always do tarot or oracle cards.
Yes.
And speaking of, I have 3 messages from the universe if you're ready. From the Antique Anatomy Tarot by Claire Goodchild. So choose card 1, 2, or 3. Card 1, the 9 of Rods. The 9 of Rods appears when you feel that you can't possibly go on. The ground beneath you looks cluttered with obstacles and each step feels shaky. But this is all an illusion. You are actually on a solid path, but are lacking the confidence to be sure footed. Do not make any major changes. Now is the time to stand your ground. Your determination and inner strength will get you through this period of confusion. Being under attack is never comfortable, regardless of the source, but don't give up. You have come so far and owe it to yourself to finish what you have started. And the key words are determination, wary, delay, exhaustion, and protection. Card 2, the 6 of Coins. Take a penny, leave a penny is the essence of the 6 of Coins. If you are in need, someone will give you what is lacking. If someone else is in need, it is up to you to do the giving. There are lessons to be learned from the extreme greed in the 4 of Coins and the extreme poverty of the 5 of Coins. The 6 of Coins is also about receiving money that you are owed. This can be from expected sources, perhaps an outstanding invoice, or from unexpected places. Maybe you've been overpaying your electric bill and are sent a refund. Keywords: generosity, sharing, charity, gratitude, blessings, bonus. And card 3, the 10 of Elixirs. The 10 of Elixirs is a very positive card to receive in a reading. There is a sense of comfort and harmony surrounding you and your loved ones, perhaps manifesting in a stable home life, enough money for your needs and then some, and someone special to share it all with. The future looks bright in terms of relationships with this card. Any past conflicts are forgiven, and unconditional love is possible because of the mutual respect you share. Keywords: comfort, harmony, prosperity, bliss, love, serenity. Thank you, universe.
Thank you, universe. What profound messages today and every day. Little magic. Well, that's Eclipses, everyone. I hope you find some points of light, of inspiration, just like Nicole and I did doing this podcast. I feel so inspired. And I feel empowered because I feel like I understand so much more.
I learned way more than I thought I was going to. I was like, I mean, yeah, we can talk about eclipses, lunar eclipse, solar eclipse, the nodes. Cool. But just like everything in this realm, there's so much more to it. It's so much deeper, so many more layers. I mean, I was blown away with the Eclipse families. That just really, to me, adds so much more meaning and makes them even more impactful.
Like being aware of the cycles and the rhythms and the connections.
Yes.
And that is another way it's connected.
Yeah. And next week, we're talking about the 12 astrological houses.
Oof. What are we going to come up with on that one?
So until then, listeners, thank you for joining us. We love you. Be good to each other.
Bye. Take care.
Bye. Thank you for listening to this episode of The Radical. The Radical is written and produced by Nicole and Christina.
Listener questions can be emailed to us at theradicalpodnc@gmail.com.
Our Instagram is The Radical Pod.
Music by Van Horton. His Instagram is Van Horton Music.